Hello, everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into one of the most intense and debated chapters of the ongoing war in Ukraine, the Pokrovsk counterattack. This battle, taking place in eastern Ukraine near the city of Pokrovsk in Donetsk Oblast, has become a symbol of both fierce resistance and strategic complexity in this prolonged conflict. Over recent months, this front line has witnessed a whirlwind of attacks, counterattacks, shifting control, heavy casualties, and evolving tactics from both Ukrainian and Russian forces, and we're going to unpack all of it carefully, clearly, and comprehensively. This situation around Pokrovsk has been one of the hottest and most contested sectors of the front for many months. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky himself has pointed to the intensity of the fighting here, noting that hundreds of engagements occur daily and that Russian forces, numbering well over 100,000 troops, continue to press their assaults on Ukrainian positions, while Ukrainian units are actively conducting counteroffensive actions to blunt those attacks and regain ground where possible. At its core, what we call the Pokrovsk counterattack is not a single dramatic moment, but rather a series of offensive operations by Ukrainian forces aimed at disrupting the Russian offensive, regaining lost territory, and preventing the encirclement and collapse of Ukrainian defenses in this strategically vital area. Pokrovsk sits on key supply lines and transportation routes that have major implications for the rest of the Donetsk front. Russian forces, for their part, have repeatedly pushed into and around the city using mechanized assaults, infiltration tactics, and heavy bombardment. Georgia today, in many respects, the fighting here has become emblematic of modern urban warfare, slow, grinding, and bloody. Analysts and official military sources report combat in the center of Pokrovsk and around its railway lines, with Ukrainian forces holding critical positions and launching small but meaningful counterattacks to challenge Russian advances. These engagements are often conducted house by house, block by block, and can involve both infantry assaults and the use of drones, artillery, and precision strikes in an effort to weaken the enemy's foothold. Plus one important thread in this story is the dispute over whether a major Ukrainian counteroffensive in Pokrovsk has truly taken place or not. Ukrainian sources and some observers describe deliberate operations designed to counter Russian advances, and in some cases regain ground or stabilize the front line, which many refer to as counterattacks. Meanwhile, some independent analysts and external commentators have questioned the scale or impact of these alleged counteroffensives, calling reports exaggerated or unverified. On the Ukrainian side, official military reporting and battlefield footage from units engaged in the sector have showcased not only defensive actions, but also offensive maneuvers targeting Russian forces, including the taking of prisoners, tactical advances north of the city, and coordinated actions by assault infantry units. In recent months, Ukrainian air assault infantry and National Guard units have publicly noted the capture of dozens of Russian soldiers during fierce engagements, which marks one of the larger numbers of enemy captives taken by Kiev's troops in this theater of war in over a year. Kiev posts still. This counterattack has not been a swift or sweeping operation. Unlike the large-scale Ukrainian counteroffensives that have occasionally made headlines in other parts of the country, the Pokrovsk actions are more limited in scope and are heavily shaped by the conditions on the ground. Urban terrain, entrenched positions, heavy artillery fire, and the sheer scale of Russian troop presence make quick gains extremely difficult. Instead, Ukrainian forces have focused on ambushes, raids, clearing operations in key neighborhoods, and incremental advances, often at high cost and under relentless pressure. In many ways, Pokrovsk has become a grinding test of endurance for both sides. Reports from military observers and battlefield analysts highlight how the frontier remains fluid, with gains and losses changing hands repeatedly. Some Ukrainian units have pushed into northern parts of the city and inflicted losses on the adversary, while Russian forces have sometimes managed to deepen their presence, especially in eastern and southern sectors of the greater front line around Pokrovsk. Weather and terrain have also played roles in shaping the fighting. At times, thick fog and poor visibility have complicated aerial reconnaissance and defensive operations, making it harder for Ukrainian units to detect and strike enemy positions, while Russian forces exploit these conditions to move or consolidate, a reminder of how nature itself becomes a factor in modern ground combat. Pravda, as we discuss the dynamics of the counterattack, it's vital to recognize that the situation is not static. Casualty figures, control over specific blocks or neighborhoods, and the broader tactical picture are constantly evolving. Ukrainian commanders have emphasized that their forces are resolutely trying to hold Pokrovsk and surrounding areas, even under severe pressure, while also mounting operations to disrupt Russian advances and regain critical logistics routes. Kiev Post, at the same time, Russian forces have repeatedly attempted to exploit weaknesses, push into key supply lines, and encircle Ukrainian units, which in turn has forced Kiev to commit reserves, adjust defensive lines, and sometimes conduct localized counterattacks, not only to regain lost ground but to prevent operational collapse in the sector. These operations are complex and often ambiguous. In war zones like this, claims and counterclaims emerge from both sides and from external commentators, which makes perfect clarity difficult. Open-source battlefield footage, official statements, independent analysis, and media reports sometimes paint different pictures, reflecting the fog of war itself. What is clear, however, is that Pokrovsk has become a symbol of tenacious defense and a grinding frontline struggle that carries weight far beyond its local geography. We must also consider the human dimension behind the military maneuvers. Civilians have suffered immensely, with repeated bombardments, displacement, and loss of life over months of conflict in and around this city. Long before the recent counterattack talk, Pokrovsk was struck by missile strikes and shelling that took dozens of civilian lives, including children, underscoring the profound human cost of this battle. Wikipedia. So what does the Pokrovsk counterattack tell us about the broader war in Ukraine? First, it shows that the fighting remains intensely contested in key eastern sectors, where both strategic objectives and symbolic significance are high. Second, it illustrates how modern warfare often devolves into prolonged engagements with shifting front lines, rather than quick victories or defeats. And third, it underscores how both sides are employing a mix of traditional ground forces, aviation, drones, tactical innovations, and hard-earned resilience to try to shape outcomes on the battlefield. For audiences watching from afar, it's tempting to look for clear winners and losers, dramatic breakthroughs, and decisive moments. But what's happening at Pokrovsk is far more complex, a mosaic of actions, counteractions, tactical advances, defensive holds, and relentless pressure from both armies. Whether these operations will coalesce into a larger Ukrainian strategic success, a stalemate, or a shift in momentum remains to be seen, and analysts continue to watch closely as the situation develops daily. In closing, only by paying attention to verified reporting, official statements from credible sources, and independent analysis can we begin to piece together the real story behind events like the Pokrovsk counterattack. These moments not only shape the course of a war, but also remind us of the immense courage, suffering, and complexity that define life on the front lines of conflict. Thank you for watching, and if you'd like updates on this and other developments from Ukraine and around the world, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. If you'd like, I can also provide a shorter version of this script, or include suggested visuals or footage cues to help bring this content to life in your video production.